I've recorded 2 videos this morning, one of which stopped recording about 10 minutes in, and I've lost 4 minutes of footage from that video in which I talked about one book in particular, and I think I might have to go back and record it, re-record it, and that is heartbreaking to me. Hi everyone, my name is Charlie, and today I'm going to be talking about nothing in particular. This video is dedicated to Leo, of Leo's Little Book Life, more commonly found on Instagram these days, but I will leave links in the description as to where you can go and find him. This is because the other day I posted my request for questions for my Q&A, and Leo commented that he had seen me in my car, thought that it was a Woolgathering video, and as such chose to listen to it on his walk, only for it to finish 2 minutes in and him to comment, "Is that all?" Therefore I went to Leo and I asked him whether there was anything that he wished for me to discuss today. And there's a bunch of questions that I'm going to save for my Q&A video, but the one in particular that he said was, where did the name Woolgathering come from? And this is because I've never had a sheep in my car, he's never seen me knitting, so where did Woolgathering come from? I will take you back to 2018 when I uploaded a video entitled Woolgathering for Vlogmas Day 9, I believe. And this was a video in which I had no idea what I was going to talk about. I just started rambling at the camera because I had decided to do Vlogmas, but I had no idea what I wanted to talk about in this video. Everything else had been themed or chosen. And it was a bit self-aggrandizing as well, simply because I had chosen at that time that I was going to write a poetry collection. This is still an ongoing project for me. It is based on something I have been asked to do by the writers group, and they think that it's a good idea. It's for me to collate all of these poems that I've been writing about farming and my aversion to sheep farming, which has been the family business for over 100 years. I don't know how far it goes back, due to the fact that my dad's biological father died when he was 6 years old, and my grandmother remarried a sheep farmer who adopted my dad. I end up exploring these relationships and everything within this poetry collection, which I don't know when it'll be released. I still am constantly working on poems for this when I'm not working on other things, but it's not something that I'm in a rush to release. However, at the time of releasing the very first Woolgathering video, I had written a poem entitled Woolgathering. It was in particular to do with a time when, after the sheep shearers had been in, I was tasked by my father to go throughout the field and find all the bits of wool that could be crammed down the sides of these full fleeces and hopefully earn a bit more money for my dad. At the time, I'd also written a poem entitled Woolgathering, which was featured in Butcher's Dog's 12th issue, I think. I do have it over there. This is Butcher's Dog issue 12, and as I say, I previously read this for the 100th Woolgathering video. Everybody else has these huge biographies at the back. All I have written is Charles Heathcote lives in Macclesfield, Cheshire. He has a BA in creative writing from Manchester Metropolitan University. I didn't realise that all of these people were going to tell such grandiose stories, otherwise I would have included about Doris books in there. My poem is here, so I'll read it for you. Woolgathering. Dad sets a task to search the fields for wool, locate all the stray pieces, pack them into Hessian sacks. The hardest part is done, he says. His calloused hands think nothing of gorse or barbed wire. Anywhere the stray white frays get caught, I set out. I pick through sheep muck and thick mud, the mere wisps of wool, memories of wool, shreds, the dregs, barely feathers of wool. Press them amongst the full coats. Feel the wax of lanolin. And that poem at the time was going to inspire the entire name of the collection, Woolgathering, and I'd had this idea in the back of my mind to do a video about woolgathering for years. I didn't know what it would be, and then I ended up using the title there for this rambly video. And at the time, with woolgathering meaning to daydream or to ramble incessantly, I felt like it suited my character rather well. And so over time, I would release woolgathering videos, sometimes every fortnight, sometimes weekly. I did have this idea that I never wanted one woolgathering video to appear right after the other, but sometimes these things just happened. That's where we are. The title of the poetry collection is no longer likely to be woolgathering due to the fact that I have discovered Patti Smith has a very popular collection entitled Woolgathering, but back in the day, that was the connection. It was pairing the fact that my father is a sheep farmer with the fact that I am able to ramble a lot and I'm something of a daydreamer. It just seemed fitting to me. It wasn't about wool, it wasn't about knitting, it was about a family history meeting who I am. I should also say thank you to everyone who has commented on the most recent woolgathering video in which I discussed the Roe vs. Wade case in America. And I have seen the responses and I've read them, but I have yet to figure out how to formulate responses to them. Indeed, as soon as that happened, I ended up feeling particularly incensed because of my own government choosing to get rid of the Human Rights Act and replace it with their own Bill of Rights, which we all know is a way for them to further their subjugation of certain individuals, for them to perhaps take away certain rights that we have known and that we have come to appreciate. It is just a way to further their control, and I honestly fear the actions of my government, as well as never being shocked by their actions, because as was evidenced by David Cameron coming into power in 2010, this is a government who does not care about the working classes. This is not a government that cares about the LGBTQIA plus community as much as they say they do. This is not a party that cares about women. This is a party full of bullying men who want to see their lives furthered and their money furthered. They want to see themselves become richer whilst we become poorer. They want to give handouts to their mates, and it is always going to be the same when it comes to a Tory government. The fact that we currently have Boris Johnson in power is also a fearsome thing, due to the fact that everybody looked at this bumbling man and they thought, oh, he's a bit of a pal, he's a mate, I could chat down the pub to him. And as I said last week, and as I will continue to say throughout my life, it is the people who pose as bumbling, act like buffoons, that can be the most dangerous. It is how they get you on side. I would much rather a person admit to their villainy than a person who tried to hide it behind deceit and behind lies. But what can you expect with the government nowadays? What can you expect when the world has started quoting Nazis as though anything they ever said was right? I am appalled, honestly, regularly appalled at the way in which this world works sometimes. I was appalled earlier this week when I was walking into town, and as I mentioned last week, they're going to have a Pride Parade next Saturday, but they are holding this Pride Parade throughout the town centre, and somebody saw the sign and went over to see what it said and immediately gave this scoff of disgust and started ranting to her husband about it. Then I overheard people talking about why do gay people or LGBTQIA plus people feel the need to thrust their lives in other people's faces? Why do they feel the need to label everything? Why can't they just exist? Yesterday I saw mention of London Pride on YouTube, and it was usurped by tons of people who were questioning Pride and why we don't have a straight Pride, and also the fact so started listing the things that they'd done throughout the day that were perfectly normal. Now, yes, it's great to see gay lives as normal and be supportive of them. When you constantly question why gay pride is necessary, you aren't looking into the history of the event, how it came about, and that is something that I feel like needs to be taught in school. We need to start adding this to the curriculum so people actually know why people still fight for rights nowadays, because as has been evidenced in America, as has been evidenced in other places throughout the world where they're constantly coming for certain people's rights, whether it be women's rights, gay rights, trans rights, whether it's any of these things, when people are constantly coming for them, there needs to be an education somewhere. And it's not happening because it is still certain aspects of queer lives are still seen as perverse, even if it is only existing. And that is all I'm going to say on the matter. Because the world is shit, and I know it. And I've said it for 2 weeks in a row. I've talked about my disdain for humanity until the cows have come home. These things are not going to change without people on the ground helping to impose that change and get their opinions heard. Boris Johnson is still talking about being in power in the 2030s, and all we can hope is that he doesn't bring in some law otherwise, writing-wise this week, just to veer off topic entirely and try to bring some kinder things to this, some more prosaic, mundane things, less worrisome things into the conversation. Writing-wise this week, still been editing and including Dane's edits into the recent redraft of Royally Doris. Bit more difficult than when he edited An Heir to Murder and I could just accept all changes simply because of certain things in the beginning where Dana started to change the years into numbers, and I said that I knew that was the incorrect way to do things. I was keeping them the same simply for house style with the Doris books and getting things correct in the later books. I also like that Harold would do this. It makes sense in my head anyway. But I have also been thinking about the next novel that I wish to write and had a conversation with Joy from the writers group over coffee, and I have been attempting the Charity Shop novel. What I'm trying to do is find a voice. So what I have been doing this week is writing from several different voices, be they people or be they inanimate objects or be they the voice of a building itself, just to try and find the voice that is going to tell the Charity Shop story to see whether that is the next story that I wish to tell. I also wrote a poem on Thursday for the writers group, and as soon as it was done and I read it, Joy turned to me and said, "That's one for the collection." And afterwards we were talking about it because it just seemed to come out of nowhere. We were supposed to be talking about verbs and active language within prose and poetry, and I wrote this poem, and when it was done, within this conversation we're talking about sometimes you can work on a poem until it's overworked. Sometimes you can write 7 drafts of a poem and still not see the light of day. And sometimes, as with this poem on Thursday, they just appear fully formed with very little editing needed and just sit there on the page glaring at you like, well, what did you expect? I was here. And you just wonder, where did that inspiration come from? Where did those lines come from? Have they been waiting around inside me all of this time? But yes, still haven't properly decided what I wish to write next, but I did find it fun writing from the perspective of a building, I will say. I don't know whether it's what my readers would like to see, but I don't care. That's part of the thing that I'm trying to do. It's a headspace I got into with Indisputably Doris in this whole idea that I'm not writing for you, I'm writing for myself. And part of what I like reading in fiction is experimental things where people don't follow the trends and don't follow the normal things. It's made me want to go back and reread Blackberry Wine because I haven't looked at that book by Joanne Harris in at least 15 years. And that book is told from the perspective of a wine bottle. And I'm not saying that this is writing that would ever see the light of day. It's just writing to help me experiment and find a voice, if that makes sense. because I've been writing as Harold for 11 years, and I don't want to be mired down in that voice. I don't want people to immediately think Charlie only has the one narratorial style. I should also say, in terms of writing, I had my event at Congleton Library on Monday. It was their short story and tea event. Parked outside my grandmother's, as I always do when I'm going to Congleton Library, and we're actually downstairs this time, which is a room I've never been in. It's been mythical to me since my childhood. I've always known it's there, but I've never visited. So I did have this moment where I felt like a professional author, especially when they'd put a settee in front of everyone for me, and they'd got my books on display, and I went and I sat at this settee after they introduced me. I couldn't do it. I could not sit down and read to these people. I had to stand up. I read From an Heir to Murder. I took questions, and even though I only sold one book, I was very happy because the audience were involved, asking questions, coming and chatting to me afterwards, and they even talked about Doris. I've been invited back for Royally Doris, and I've been invited back for a possible event happening in autumn alongside some other writers, so that's something to look forward to. And it felt like my old events again. It felt like people were wanting to know all about literature and what I'm writing, and it just felt good to me to be able to enthuse with people about my work. And I was very happy when somebody recognised the work that I put into crafting the way that people will look, and she said, "You're a people watcher, aren't you?" And I would say, as I said to her, I'm more of a people listener. I find dialogue much more easy to write than I do description, but this particularly came about because I described someone as a cross between, it made someone look like a cross between a hawk and a milk bottle. No. It made someone look as though he was the descendant of a hawk and a milk bottle. And that line just struck her, and she said that I was a people watcher because of that, and was really interested. She's the one who bought the copy, interested in the ways in which I work outside of being a writer to influence my writing. And I was glad of these questions because they weren't necessarily questions I've had before as somebody who's tended to write comedy or these monologues. It was nice to get feedback and questions that were related to the actual crime genre. Yes, sometimes I had to bring stuff back to Doris, but that's just the nature of the fact that I'm writing a book set in the same world. So I was glad of that. I was glad to be back out there, and although I don't have any more events planned, and I will just have to knuckle down and get Royally Doris finished now, I was glad of the experience. Film-wise, television-wise, nothing. Not watched anything. Didn't get around to watching Doctor Strange 2 last week, so just put on Hawkeye for my mother, which she's finishing off watching today. Apart from the latest episode of Bob's Burgers on Disney Plus, I've not watched anything new. Monday, I didn't get back until after 6. Tuesday, I chatted to Charlie of Charlie Brook. Then I edited the video, took Sally out on a walk. By the time that was done, I was uploading the video. And then Wednesday came around, and I don't really know what I got up to on Wednesday. Did I read on Wednesday? I don't know. I had no idea. I know that Thursday was the writers' group. And I went for a walk in the morning, then writers' group, went for coffee, got home, then I've been in work the last 2 days. But Wednesday, what did I do Wednesday? I didn't have an Italian conversation, and I planned on Wednesday to actually watch a film. I remember that. Never got to watch the film. Planned to read, that was it, Flaming Saving Agnes by Rachel Cusk. Started reading this book, and oh my goodness, Rachel Cusk is now reminding me of Jane Austen. This book came out in 1993. She's reminding me of Jane Austen because every time I read it, I don't have any idea what she's going on about. I read 10 pages the other day before even realising that the protagonist was in a maze. This book is only 218 pages, so I was planning to finish off my month of June with it. I've ended up having to read a chapter every day because it's just so slow going, so all round the houses, and sometimes it's witty and I'm like, yeah, that's funny. And I really like the fact that Agnes is this insecure 20-something, because that seems entirely fitting for the character and the time and everything. It works, but it's the writing. I can tell that Cusk hasn't yet found her style. She's working at it, but she's going round the houses of it. And it seems like Cusk is trying to be literary, and she's trying to pull these metaphors out of places and these similes. It seems quite stylistic of the 90s and the sort of fiction that I read when I was younger from the 90s that would ultimately bore me, because it seemed that everyone was trying to be literary, but in trying to be literary they weren't allowing their voices to shine through. Hilary Mantel's done it a few times. Flood, for the most part, I know I gave it a favourable review last year, but for the most part that book's boring. All that really interested me was that final description of Manchester in the end and being like, I get this. And that's what Flame is Saving Agnes is doing. 130 pages I am into that book, and my goodness, it's hard going. It's tough going to get into the writing of that author, I can tell you sometimes. Also not sure what she's saying too much when it comes to feminism and what her stance is on that. And it all seems a bit weird and wishy-washy. That's all I'll say at this point. When I get to the end, I can tell you more about it. I've got quite a few books on the go, so much so that I said to my friend Charlie this morning, I'm thinking of recording a video about finishing all of the books that I'm currently in the middle of, because I'm currently in the middle of The Way It Breaks by Polis Loizou, Saving Agnes by Rachel Cusk, How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo and Mbue, and The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles, the latter two of which I can't talk about because they are for the Booktube prize. Started the poetry collection Limbic the other day because I put in an order with Queer Lit for the independent bookshop week as the rail strike was happening, so I couldn't get down there, and all of those books finally came in. Should I show them to you? Can I show them to you? I can show them to you, they're right here. So there's the darn Rachel Cusk. So, Limbic by Peter Scalpello. All I'll say, a lot about gay sex in here. I know, it's a little bit saucy, love. Yeah. But also has some great form, great use of form and experimentation with form in here. Plays on words and style, very good. We have Reckless Paper Birds by John McCullough, and I got this book specifically because this poet and I have a few mutual friends and have become friends on Facebook and various other areas, and so I thought that it'd be good to read his poetry. And The Band Played On by Randy Shilts. Got this one because it was mentioned in Fairyland by Alicia Abbott, and is the author of this interviewed over 1,000 people during the HIV/AIDS epidemic, and this is a chronicle of all of that. It looks as though sometimes it's going to be this blend of diary, non-fiction and interview, and a few people have got in touch with me and told me that this is a hard-hitting, important text in terms of queer history, but also in terms of discussing the politics surrounding the AIDS epidemic and the way in which it was politicised. We have Fighting Proud, the untold story of gay men who served in 2 world wars. I got this because of reading Fabulosa by Paul Baker, and he references the gay men who fought in the wars and why it was perhaps seen as more acceptable during that time, but the way that the men were treated after they returned home. We have The Velvet Rage, Overcoming the Pain of Growing Up Gay in a Straight Man's World by Alan Downs, PhD. This is one that I have heard talked about regularly, although I don't know anything about the book myself. It's going to discuss the problems that are still around despite the fact that gay people are supposedly accepted, which I think, considering what I was talking about earlier, it's going to be fitting to read. Now, I have a deep adoration for Fabulosa by Paul Baker at the moment. That book is one that I'm going to be singing the praises of for a while, so I had to get Outrageous, the story of Section 28 and Britain's battle for LGBT education by the author. I was going to wait until the paperback came out, but I didn't see the point in the end, so I ordered it, and I'm looking forward to it, despite the fact that it promises to upset me with the state of the world and humanity. And then I got Wynd Volume 2, The Secret of the Wings by James Tynion IV and Michael Dialynas. Really enjoyed the first book in this series, and it made it onto my favourites of the second quarter of the year, so I'm looking forward to this one. And just because we're sat here and the library books are here, I was watching Stuart of The Library is Open. I still not watched their video in its entirety, but they were talking about books that they had enjoyed recently, and they mentioned my name. I had to wait a week. To find out how they had mentioned me, because they set the video as a premiere, but I wasn't here when it started premiering, so came in a bit late. But they talked about me in reference to Young Mungo by Douglas Stuart. So what they were saying was that I had read Shuggy Bane and did not know whether I would want to read any more of Douglas Stuart's writing, and that is because I don't like the way that working class stories are often told in this very grim manner, and they aren't ever talked about as though there's anything joyous behind them. There are never any happy experiences talked about when it comes to working class characters, which is something that I've tried to change when it comes to my own writing. When I write about working class characters, I want to emphasise that there are moments of joy in their life, because it doesn't happen often. But Stuart had a good reaction to Young Mungo, so much so that when I was at the library the following day after watching the video and I saw that they had a copy, I was shocked that it was there, because it is such a popular book, and I saw that it had been taken out and wasn't due back for a while. But it turned out the library had 2 copies, and so I've got it. And I'm going to read it. And I'm going to read it despite the fact that I know that Shuggy Bane upset me due to the fact that it was another tale of working class trauma. But I do think that Douglas Stuart is able to craft a yarn, and that is something that I've continued to say. Douglas Stuart can write. I don't dislike his writing. I just dislike this. One thing is I dislike the capitalising on working class trauma when you are no longer from that background. It almost seems a bit disingenuous to me, but also at the same time, the only way working class stories are going to get to be seen is if a book becomes popular, so it leaves me in this quandary, but also because I wish there weren't so many stories surrounding working class trauma out there, but also I do think that it's a good thing to talk about queer experiences in more working class, lower class neighbourhoods, because they aren't viewed in the same way as queer relationships in middle class, upper class neighbourhoods. They aren't treated with the same acceptance necessarily. And then I also got Learwife by JR Thorp. Now, I'll admit I don't know much about this. I do. Is it something of a rewriting of King Lear? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. I am the queen of 2 crowns, banished 15 years, the famed and gilded woman, a bad-luck baleful girl, mother of 3 small animals now gone. I am 55 years old. I am Lear's wife. I am here. We will see how I get on with this. I do know that I probably only have 2.5 weeks left to read Young Mungo before it's requested back at the library, so I'm going to try and get this read within the next 4 days, alongside The Lincoln Highway and How Beautiful We Were and other books. July should be a very reading-heavy month for me. I want to get a few books out of the way before we get to the book-along list, because Charlie Brooke and I will be reading the long list together. We could have 13 books that neither of us own, and we'll be scrambling to collect from libraries and friends and other places. Yes, if you didn't know, ever since I set out to get my degree, whenever I've had a reading list or anything, I have emailed every single one of my contacts in my contact book asking them whether they have a book that I could borrow. It's just the person that I am, and I recommend that you do the same. Anyway, my coffee's gone cold with being sat here for 30 minutes. I've been recording for 2 hours. one thing that I didn't talk about here was music. All I've done is listen to Muna's latest self-titled album, which I was very happy to see entered the UK charts because it's their first album to do so. And again, what I want, fantastic song of just queer joy. But there are a few songs that Muna have released that are maybe a bit more political, and I am going to be leaving links to them in the description, because it's always nice to find artists who are saying what you wish to say. So that's where we'll end things today. If you've read any of these books and would like to discuss them, please feel free to do so in the comments. Recommendations are also always welcome for music, for film, and for television, and for books. Send me your recommendations. How are you? How is your week going? If you are a writer, how's that happening? What you're reading, what you're writing, what you're watching, what you're listening to. I want to know it all. Let's have a chat. I hope that you got something out of this video besides sheer boredom. And until next time, that is all. And it is in this moment that Charlie recognises that he is going to be 30 in a fortnight. My goodness. Oh my god. This is why I don't celebrate birthdays, so that I don't have to commemorate shit like this. 3 decades on this planet, and all that's happened is that it's got worse. Life, oh life, oh life. Do 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 do.